Hello and welcome to episode 349 of the Adelaide Show podcast. I'm Steve Davis. It's a special episode for you because I remembered, this is the inspiration for it, I remembered when I worked at 5MU in the late 80s, us young blokes running a radio station had this crazy idea over the Easter weekend of resurrecting dead artists. And so every hour we had a featured artist we were raising from the dead, Janis Joplin and all those sorts of... Did get a bit of feedback, I must say, from the naivety of that promotion that just chomped across the landscape of Murray Bridge, the Barossa, Victor Harbour, Adelaide Hills. Anyway, still, there's something in that lingers on. And because it is another Easter weekend, and really new life is the theme of an Easter weekend, we're focusing on a few approaches. First of all, the Violets, an Australian band from Adelaide, had amazing early success. Some record company kerfuffles happened. They disbanded in 2001, and a few years ago they came back together on their 25th anniversary to release their first album, and they're going strong. A brand new album out, which is called Smoke, Mirrors and Other Half-Truths. And here's the thing. Do listen to this interview with Matt Cahill, because it really is, as I note, like musical paleontology. We get the warts and all view of what the music industry is like behind the scenes. And it is like you see in all those Hollywood stereotypical movies. But to hear its truth and to hear this was happening in and around Adelaide and Australia is just fascinating. Matt Cahill is so generous. Now, I've got a copy of this album to give away on CD, and all I'm going to ask you to do, and I'll mention this on the socials, is have a listen to the interview, and if you can tell us somewhere on your favourite social media platform and tag the Adelaide Show and the Violets, telling us on what Adelaide Street was Matt Cahill parked when he first heard the Violets on Triple J. What street was he on? Was he parked? He just pulled into it when the Violets came on the radio. Put that out in a big post, and the first person to do that I will post them a copy of this album, this CD, Smoke, Mirrors and Other Half-Truths. Fascinating interview. But also, to keep the theme going, there's a new arising in the world of gin. And I know we've got gin everywhere in this state at the moment, but Frankly Gin has a brand new gin, or a couple of gins. They won awards, just like the Violets won awards with their first album. They've won awards with their first gin, and we're going to have a little taste with Bernie Woods from Frankly Gin, because she is an absolute fitness freak, and she's got a great take on how to enjoy gin properly. And to that end, they have carefully distilled this so you can drink the gin neat. They encourage you, if you want a mixer, to try soda. It goes beautiful with soda. But they've also got a special range of mixers that are very, very low calorie, low sugar from Australia. Bernie will get into that so that you can actually have your gin and still stay nice and safe and keep the calorie count low so you can enjoy your gin guilt-free. But lots of music from the Violets as well as we walk through their musical history. Enjoy it. Happy Easter weekend, everybody, and let's get into it.
Wave on waves, it's the Ghana band room. Adelaide, Adelaide, lady, who landed here and made it their home. Adelaide, Adelaide, who 10-pound bombs to the refugees. Adelaide, Adelaide, lady, who brings Italians to the knees. Adelaide, Adelaide, who oh, little Adelaide, oh, Adelaide, who oh, little Adelaide, who.
In the spirit of reconciliation, the Adelaide Show podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout South Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.
Adelaide, 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 ooh, Adelaide, 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 ooh.
G'day, it's John Murch here. You're listening to The Adelaide Show. Stay tuned because it's the only way you'll find out about your Adelaideans.
Now, I like to write my own introductions to interviews, but the wordsmithery that I found online for the subject of this interview, the band The Violets, is so sublime, I'm just going to use it verbatim. And I quote, "From the day they first formed in Adelaide back in 1990, the Violets were an enigma, created from a fusion of shimmering guitar lines, sonic abstraction, and an almost cinematic vision. They smashed together light and dark and made beautiful agony dance cheek to cheek with pretty mystery. It was pop, it was prog, it was flat-out indie rock, but it was never quite like anything else." And I think we'll discover that our guest today is quite like nobody else. Singer-songwriter, guitarist, producer, Matt Cahill. Welcome to the Adelaide Show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Steve. I appreciate it.
Now, before we start plucking the petals of the flower that is the story of the band and the music industry, let's stop and smell the violets with Mary Who.
But I'm sure I've seen his mother here. Still, the fingers of temptation will the make us run for cover, Mary. Still, all I know is all you've shown me about you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Who can stop these voices as they talk amongst my insides? In a way that makes me wonder if I was in the conversation to begin with. Still, all I know is all you've shown me about you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whistler, but I'm sure I've seen his mother, yeah. Still, fingers of temptation where they make us run for cover, Mary. What I see, you've grown, and all I hear is all you've told me. What I know is you're never gone forever, Mary. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The Violets and Mary Who. Now, Matt. Wow. All right. Now, I have, of course, re-release of Least Regret and a special preview copy that you lent me of Smoke, Mirrors and Other Half-Truths. And I've become quite smitten.
Oh, thank you.
And now, because of the dramatic history of the early success, the Triple J airplay, the record company signings, then the record company feuds, then the band dissolving, the band reforming 20 years later, I feel like we've got a rare opportunity for some musical paleontology to help us deeply understand the workings of a band and the music industry. So with that elaborate setup, Matt Cahill, can you take us right back to the beginning and piece together how the Violets came to be?
Oh, well, to the best of my memory. Oh, God, where do I start?
Was it you who was the prime mover? Was there a...
Well, I have always wanted to be in a band, you know, and I'd sort of, as I was growing up, sort of from 14 onwards, I'd zipped in and out of acts that, you know, were probably already together. And I met the drummer and I met the guitarist separately, and I worked with Peter, the drummer, in very early incarnations of acts that we tried to pull together. And then I met Jeremy, and he and I started working together, and then I put the two of them together, and Gary came in, and it was very early in the piece, probably only about 1920, I think, yeah.
And so how does that get cemented? What were rehearsals like? Because I remember as a young boy doing my homework in year 12, window open, and hearing some young band doing da-da-da-da in their shed.
Sure, yeah.
And what was how did you get together with that chemistry?
We did rehearse in sheds at various parents' houses until those said parents couldn't take it anymore. And I moved into a rentable property down south. I was probably about 20, 21, and converted my lounge room, much to the dismay of my partner at the time, into a proper rehearsal space. And then Jeremy bought a recording engineer around. He was doing a course, might have been SAE or something like that, but he was doing a course, and then that engineer got very enthused by the songs that we were writing, and next thing there was a recording studio in my kitchen, and you know, the control room's in the kitchen, and then the actual studio space was the lounge. And I just went from there. We just got addicted to recording very young.
Wow, so you really made that quite feel at home, didn't you, the way you decked out that...
Yeah. For sure.
Was your partner really happy?
Not really, because the lounge room got shuffled into a second bedroom. It was very small. Yeah, now, but we were always supported by our friends and girlfriends and partners.
Right. I need to insert a footnote, though. I remember you saying that during your days on the road being managed, you weren't allowed to talk about girlfriends and partners when you were doing interviews, were you?
Oh, well, yeah, no, it was...
We're doing it now.
It was discouraged in the early days to talk about partners, just in case some young fan had a crush on one of us, and, you know, you didn't want to ruin record sales and... Yeah, so all these other ridiculous caveats.
You had to signal availability.
Sure, that's right, yeah.
Wow. I just want to get a sense of the psychological landscape at this point, because I'm very aware there's a thing called imposter syndrome that many people suffer from, and that's the thing in which we doubt our intrinsic qualities and our vision. You and your band members were preparing to stick your heads above the trenches and share your music with a world of music listeners and an industry that can be fickle and really passionate either way. Were you driven by a great confidence and calling you had to be there? Were there moments of doubt?
I was really naive. I just figured you got a band together and you got signed. I was just so naive. I was just ridiculously, yeah. I remember marching into the head office of DB magazine after we'd played about 3 gigs, and I went and saw the editor and I said, "Hey, no one's writing about my band. What's going on?" Like, I just... Luckily, she thought it was endearing, and yeah, and it kind of went from there. But no, I was insanely naive. Yeah.
Wow, so imposter syndrome just didn't have a chance.
No, I mean, I had it to a degree, especially when we hit the very big stages.
Yeah.
I was just like, man, I'm out of my depth here.
Okay.
But I don't have it anymore. Because now I don't care anymore, like what anyone thinks.
We're going to circle back to some of that a bit later, but I need us, because we're going to play another track now. And what would you nominate as the big break? What was the thing that shifted everything up a few gears? And can I just put my penny down on the table? Does the song Ain't Love Grand got a role to play in what you're about to share?
When we first kind of jammed it together, we all knew it was something. And when our manager heard it, he said, I think you've the ticket through the door here. And I'll never forget that when we signed with Phantom Records, Sebastian Chase was the guy that we were dealing with at Phantom. He told our manager at the time, he received it on the Friday, and he was so excited he wanted to call on the Friday, but he left it till the Monday. But then it took off very quickly. Like from there, we were in like this professional recording space. We had to re-record it and try and capture it again. But we did. Like the one that
We're about to
Triple
listen
J
to.
embraced
Yeah.
was this one you're about to hear. Yeah. So
Well, Ain't Love Grand. Let's have a listen.
My telephone rings, and I begin to seize the deed. And I'm quite surprised to find you on the line, although you made no sound. And I ask your name, although I feel I've asked in vain. I don't know what's real. And I wonder why, as I reach for the sky, how come we play these games? So tell me, don't you leave, am I ever gonna love this way again?
I'm intrigued. You said the moment you were jamming this, you were looking at each other, your manager was and going, there's something here. Is that X factor? Is it hard to define and explain? Or was there, I don't know, why?
Well, I'd played with a lot of other musicians, but I never felt the way that I feel with these three people.
And that song was just like this moment where things just gelled.
Yeah, we knew each other musically. We were starting to get to know each other musically enough to kind of read each other.
Yeah.
So
things started going a bit nuts at this point, and I just want to reflect. I've watched a couple of biopics, one on Elvis Presley, one on Johnny Cash, when they were fledgling, not the icons they became. And at least in one of those biopics, there's a beautiful scene when they hear themselves being played on the radio for the first time. Now, with Ain't Love Grand, which did get picked up and airplay, can you remember where you were and what it felt like?
Yeah.
Can you take us through hearing yourself, your band,
Sure.
on the wireless?
Well, I'd rounded the corner of King William Street into Hindley Street, and I just found a park, and it came on the radio, and I just couldn't believe it. I was just floored. It was fairly surreal the first time. Like, I think I had like a big Motorola brick telephone at the time, and I must have called everybody that I knew and just said, "Oh my God, we were just played on the radio." So, and then of course, as radio play goes well for you, and then you in the old days you'd get your royalty checks and stuff like that, and we just couldn't believe it. Like, we'd look at our checks and go, "Oh my God, let's write more songs."
What sort of money are we talking about at that point? It's all under the bridge.
Well, I remember on our next single, which did really well, was a track called Somewhere. I think at the end of that, I don't know whether it was sort of a third into the year or a quarter, but I think we got 5,000 each.
Oh, wow.
In radio play. So, yeah.
Okay. This is why people wanted to form bands, isn't it?
Well, it was back then.
Yeah. Not so much these days, I take it. It's much more splintered, I imagine.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And Spotify doesn't hand out checks quite to the same degree, do they?
Not really, no.
Now, this song... actually, I want to go back. Before you leave that moment, here's what I would have done. I've pulled into Hindley Street off King. We come on the radio. Did you accidentally sort of wind the windows down and turn the radio up?
No.
So that people could accidentally hear?
No, I actually felt self-conscious as well. Like, as well as being thrilled.
Yeah.
You know, like, I was working at the time and I called up work, and when the secretary put me on hold, I was the music on the hold.
Oh.
It was like, it was very strange.
And now, the Australian Music Awards intersected with your lives around this time. What was that experience like? Take us through that story.
Yeah, it was really interesting. We were nominated in 4 categories. I think I had a couple of personal nominations. I was genuinely happy that I didn't win because I didn't want to go there with my gang and then take a personal accolade. And the last award of the night was Album of the Year. And, you know, we're up against some pretty good competition. And,
do you remember who?
I think Super Jesus, and
Oh
there was a couple of others, maybe the Janes. I'm not. Look, I honestly don't quote me. I can't remember.
Okay.
When they announced it, I thought I'd misheard it, and then my manager just leaned across the table and he stuffed a speech in my top pocket.
Oh, now that's a manager.
Yeah, he'd prepared it in case. And when I was like reading it, I was shaking. I remember, you know, like it was an amazing moment, like that we in relatively short space of time to standing up there and in front of our peers. And
that was least regret,
it was, yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, it's kind of a play on words because the least is like the leasing of a building. So it's hard to... It was just a play on words.
Temporary regret? I wonder, thinking about 90s music,
sure,
do you least regret to be able to write those moody songs, and then you let then you move on?
Sure. Look, I'm not really sure what goes on in my subconscious, to be honest. Like, sometimes I don't know what I've written until I zoom out later and I look at it and then go, oh my God, I've actually written that situation. So,
okay. Yeah. On the writing, you're being played on Triple J at this point. You've got this shiny award up on your mantelpiece, which you can vaguely see.
Well, that's another story, actually. Yeah.
What happened to tell us?
Well, they spelt it wrong, and they actually spelt it Least.
Oh,
yeah.
L-E-A-S-T instead of L-E-A-S-E-D.
And our manager said, "Don't worry, I'll get that fixed." And it disappeared, and we never saw it again.
Wow. But probably the least of your regrets.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Uh,
we would have had to share it. There was only one.
Yes, exactly. Now tell me though, at this time, the airplay's happening, the award's done, you're going back to write some more. What's the psychological effect, knowing now that this is the big game and everything's watched? Do you end up double thinking yourself in
Oh, all the time. Yeah. Look, I personally didn't appreciate it much. The shows were coming thick and fast. You know, as big name acts were coming into town, and we were the ones that were opening up for them, so the pressure was just getting more and more. They wanted more material. You know, I didn't want to work that way at all. Jeremy and I were quite into kind of soundscapey stuff. We were more interested in the B-sides than we were in the A-sides. And I think that infuriated the A&R, to be honest. Like, I remember, you know, being told one day, "Look, when you're as big as U2, you can do what you like, but right now we just need singles," and it was just this kind of thing, and, you know, it's like I wasn't interested in it at all. I never have been, to be honest. I've been my own worst enemy in that regard, I think.
It actually surprises me to hear that, because that's the stereotype we see in some movies, where if you're not the Beatles, or you're the Beatles before you've made it, you get told, "We want this. Make this can of Spam for us that meets the appetite that we're feeding right now."
That's right.
That's real. That's true.
Oh, yeah.
That's-
Yeah. Especially when someone's invested a lot of money in you. Like, we're talking, you know, 50,000 at one point on a record. So, and back then in the late 90s, that was a hell of a lot of money.
So, if you did give in to just placate them with something catchy, in the classical world, you can say, we'll do a Mozart, the very simple three-chord progression that Mozart really owned, and a lot of pop music. Can you just pull something out of your back pocket and say, because R.E.M., one of their albums, I remember the lead singer saying, "Oh, look, I just turned that out and I knew every song would be a hit." He just knew, because there was a simple
Well, look, there was a moment that we did placate them, but nobody felt deeply satisfied by it at all. And the song, luckily, kind of got parked because it was just sugar sweet pop. We really are more interested in very long, complicated
Yes.
tapestries. Well, you know, without being silly about it, like, you know, you've got to quench your own soul, or what are you doing? You know, like.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want to get my head around this gap of the 90s in my musical history. So I'm going to bare my soul with my understanding of musical evolution and then have you correct me. Here we go. Beginning of sort of popular music time, we had simple harmony vocals, drum, guitar, keyboard, maybe some brass. This is the early days. We're talking late 40s, 50s, early 60s. Country, folk, blues. Rock and roll sort of simplified things, made the sounds a bit harder, some strong hooks. Then things started slipping a bit more experimental, especially towards the late 60s, backing tracks being used, layers.
Floyd.
Yep. So 60s, early 70s. Then we got even more sophisticated. There was clearer production sounds. There was a bigger sound. And in the 70s, along with the emergence of glam and punk as well on the sides, then we come to the 80s. And my recollection is really high power rock and roll and or that electric music to the fore. And I remember thinking that some of the hits in the 80s were really like some of those sickly hits from the early 60s, but just done with more modern
Panache,
techniques, so they sounded more modern. And then the 90s. Now, here's what I see. I see electric fake sounds being dumped in the 90s in favour of dirty, murky, emotional, throaty, frenzied masses of guitars, a token set of drum lines, and vocalisation that was not so much focused on the lyrics, but on the sound of the voice. You could say there was almost a trance-like quality to the 90s sound that was punctuated and differentiated by little crumbs of vocal quirks just to satisfy our desire for some confection amid the serious mining of frustration and expression. Your reaction? Am I around the mark?
Oh, 100%, yeah. I do recall, my friend and I were only discussing it the other day, that 80s kind of really high production, heavy rock and even the metal, that kind of sound, it never let you in. It was like really hard varnish. And yet, by the time you get to the 90s rock, it's a space that you can enter. It's so organic and real. And I always loved how David Bowie, when I was listening to him as a kid, I couldn't understand what he was saying. I used to love it, and I used to read the lyrics and go, oh my God, that's, who knew what he was mumbling? But it was good. He was articulating his own way.
Yeah.
And, I loved it.
Now, I want to just double-check my intuitions here, because those little hooks that I remember from the 90s songs I've heard, there's one from the Violets World, that song Somewhere. There's that little thing that comes throughout where it's somewhere in the back of my mind. You've got that bit. That's what I mean. In fact, I've got about a 10-second snippet. Let's have a listen.
I don't care to recall all the detail. Somewhere in the back of my life.
There. Now, something like that I would call it a golden hook, because it's, we latch on to that. Is that planned when you write the song? Does it emerge in the studio, or can that sometimes be the prime idea that you then build a song around?
No, it just happened in... it's kind of like, as we were writing that song, there was just a perfect break to do something kind of expressionistic, and I just went for it, so...
and what's it like then years later, someone like me hears it and I go, oh, I love that. Am I just falling for the crumbs of simple joy you've sent me, or is it good that you...
it was definitely physical therapy for me to be able to sing that at the time, although I look back and I sound like a castrati at that point. But yeah, it was my soul was twisting, like I was... At the time, I was, going through some heavy stuff, and that was the kind of the material that was landing on the floor for the guys, unfortunately.
I've got another very quick snippet I just want to squeeze in for Nero. This is very quick. Full throttle guitar.
Sure.
Have a listen. Tell me, when that is in full swing, that's got to feel good.
It did, yeah, it did. It felt amazing. It was great to play live, because you can just smash the guitar, and it's cathartic, yeah, for sure. Like
powerful. It's almost like you've got this sonic electromagnetic ray gun that you're just blasting everything. That is just full bore. There are a few bands that capture that.
Yeah, it feels good to do, to play. I remember the first time we ever plugged in, it was the second big day out. The PA that they had there was absolutely gargantuan. And when I hit like a power chord, I felt it like wave over the audience. It was just amazing, yeah.
That's we don't actually think of the musicians feeling that. We think of that more. That's what. But you were right there.
Oh, you could feel it. Yeah, for sure. Like those side stacks were really powerful.
So those early neighbours and families that put up with you guys rehearsing.
Well, it wasn't all like that, but yeah, we were loud. We were loud. Yeah.
Tell me, advice for parents and neighbours today, if there is a young group doing this near you, should we be tolerant because one day we're going to reap the rewards, or have you also gentrified and tell them to shut up?
Well, I've soundproofed my studio as good as I possibly can. I could probably try and do it a little bit more, but I am really conscious of how the neighbours feel about it. Yeah, but when you're a kid, you don't care.
I just want to come back to that mood thing we just started touching on in the 90s music. Mood was really forward. in much of the songs, especially a mood of despair and even melancholy to some degree. Have you got a sense why? Not just from the realm of the violets, it was bigger than just the violets. What was happening in the water or the air of the 90s?
I think, well, I can't speak for a lot of other songwriters, but I know that I started to become autobiographical and people related to it, and people, you know, we got fan mail. I remember one in particular from a kid on Somewhere. He said, I bought it, took it home, and I must have played it for 4 hours while I screamed in my flat.
Oh, wow.
I was like,
Wow.
well, I know that feeling, kid, you know, because that's how I felt when I wrote it. And I started, you know, like when we first came up with it, we must have played it about 10 times in a row because it was just therapy, you know. I'm sure Kurt Cobain did the same thing when he came up with Teen Spirit. I think they played it over and over and over just because it's, yeah.
How does that feel? Like that was... I'm a huge Leonard Cohen fan,
Sure.
and so Leonard was my partner in emotional journey. Yeah.
Well, you feel validated, that's the thing.
Yes.
Like,
And there's this young person who you've thrown this lifeline, an emotional lifeline through, for some purging. That's got to feel almost priestly.
I was probably too young at the time to kind of, you know, to take on a kind of Pied Piper of jilted youth kind of thing. But I loved those songs we were really passionate about, you know, and like I think that's the difference between then and now. Like we've kind of relaxed in our skins now. The new album, it's complex and it's layered, but I think there's more of a sophistication to what we're doing. Whereas back then it was just primal energy. Mm-hmm. We were young and we were smashing our guitars and drums, and you know.
Just before we come to the new album, I've got one more to play of the old one, Pretty Hate Machine, because while we're talking about becoming more autobiographical, to me, this song is very self-critical, almost confessional. Could you take us through the journey to set us up so we can listen to this? Because I heard this for the first time, and I think I sent you a message or something at the time. It just, oh my God.
Well, we were in the sessions for Lisa Regret, and we finished Subtitle, and we were now making the full-length album. And I was feeling melancholy. An incident had happened in my life, and I just, you know, it's like putting pen to paper. But I actually wrote it the night before, came to the studio, did 2 takes, and I don't think I've ever played it since. I don't think I've ever played it again. We didn't play it live, and yeah, I probably struggle to remember it, but yeah, it was just a one-off thing.
Wow.
And looking back, when I analysed that record, that moment was a kind of a point of difference and a breathing space in an otherwise cacophonous record, and that got me thinking about album layout and that kind of thing. But yeah, but it is very autobiographical. Yeah, there's no two ways about it.
I'm intrigued to think that you probably struggle to play it now. So this is a great service that we're going to offer. Matt Cahill, here's Pretty Hate Machine to refresh your memory.
The passengers go home with little knowledge of their grave. Their instructions still scribbled on their foreheads, despite what they believe. I'll come with you when you die, but in your head you live alone. Yes, mother, I chew it all before I swallow. I spit back all I know. I'm a pretty hate machine, so dark inside I gleam. If you were only willing to wallow in my sorrow, I could show you all I've seen. I'm a pretty hate machine. Sometimes I only wish that I to wear my sleeve to cover up my heart. I don't think that's much to ask. Hey to you. Sometimes my mind's in little pieces. Bits and parts. I found the whole. I only wish that you and them and I could call on through. I'm a pretty hate machine. No one can hear me scream. I'm an articulate liar, liar. My tongue is on fire. Please believe me. I'm a pretty hate machine. There's only room for me. If you were only willing to wallow in my sorrow, I could show you all I see. I'm a pretty hate machine. I'm a pretty hate machine. I'm a pretty hate machine. I'm a pretty hate machine.
All right, Pretty Hate Machine. And I think I like the way you described where that sat on the album. It concurs with my experience of listening to it too. It's like it's orchestrated with this movement, then a pause, and then you regroup again.
Sure.
Now, we're in history now. Everything's going great for the Violets. You were touring, you're recording, Phantom Records, I believe, 13 odd years with them. And then you secured a deal with Cahill, Shock Records. Am I-
Yes.
That's amazing, but in those giddy heights, things happened. You got embroiled in what you describe as a record label war.
Well, that actually came at the end. With the
Yes.
Krell, we decided that we would take the offer because the record company was in our own backyard. Like, it'd be nice to stroll into your own record company's office, but Phantom was in Sydney, and we could never do it. So the phone calls were protracted, and the faxes and those sorts of things back in those days. So we took it here, and it was very ambitious label, and it was really had a lot of and our friends were there as well. Like, we had other mates around town that we'd been playing with, and they were signed as well. So it just felt like.
Can you remember who they were?
A good move. Oh yeah, Honey Fix. Like, I still personally work with Josh, the bass player, to this day.
Yep.
And so yeah, they were our friends, and it just felt really good. And our manager was brought on as an A&R man as well, so it's it just felt perfect at the time. And of course, that when Shock got involved, and there was I can't really go into it for certain reasons, but it all fell in a heap. Probably about 2-3 years into it.
And that was so you got two record labels sort of fighting, having.
Well, they weren't fighting over us. They were. We were stuck in between. We couldn't. Someone from our record company went to Shock.
Yep.
And we couldn't come across. We were kind of stuck. Yeah.
And so we come then to the point of making a decision to stop being the Violets.
Yeah, we did our last show the day that George Harrison died, and it was either shop around and try and find another label that would be interested in what we were trying to do. And I think what we were doing was kind of really diverging at that time with what was current. So we were kind of alienating ourselves into the bargain as well. So we just decided to pursue other things. There was no ceremony or anything.
Okay.
It was just that was the last show we played. And Gary and his partner were having a baby. Jerry and I had things we wanted to do. Everyone had another project that they wanted to just invest maybe 6 months in. And I think that was the thing. We sort of, after the show, we did a great show. And the backstage thing, I said, look, I've got this thing I want to pursue. You're having a kid. You know, how about we just come back in 6 months? And everyone's like, yeah, for sure, you know. I remember walking down the street just feeling light as a feather after that because in the end we were playing so much we didn't even rehearse.
Yeah.
We just turned up at the shows.
And
it was,
do
yeah, like a Gatling gun. But that 6 months turned into 20 years.
So, okay, well, I'm glad. Thank you for taking us through that because I had read about this and I assumed it was going to be as this violent renting of the band, but in fact it was more your guitars did gently weep to honour the George Harrison link, and off you went.
Yep.
And 20 years later, my goodness, what did you get up to? I know
Evolatar. Well, I wanted something. It reminded me of Shangri-La, and I wanted something that I didn't want to be in the band. The such and suches.
Yeah.
I just wanted something that was like, I wanted people to say, how do you pronounce that? What is that? You know, I wanted to,
I don't feel
and
so
it
bad
worked.
now.
Yeah. Well, I put that together. Well, over the last sort of 5 years of the Violets, maybe 6 years, I'd written songs and a couple of them got rejected here and there, like just no one was vibing on it, but I didn't want to throw it in the bin. And so I put Evolatar together as a collaborative project to record those songs that I'd written for the Violets that they hadn't recorded.
Yep.
So the very first Evolatar album is those songs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course that's Love-Hate backwards, isn't it?
It is, that's correct.
There's
no denying it. Yeah.
And if you want to, dear listener, episode 323, we played Run with the Hunted. So that kept you busy. And then now bring us back to the Violets world, because you then, at some point not so long ago, re-engineered, then re-released Least Regret. How did that happen and why did that happen?
We approached our record company CEO about what do we have to do to be able to release our back catalogue. We'd like to, you know. And he was incredibly amicable, and he just said, look, it's yours.
Wow.
Yeah, he had no interest in pursuing it anymore, and he just said, look, it's yours. Do what you want. It's fine, you know. And so we secured the rights, and we thought, well, the 25th anniversary of that album, one album of the year, let's see if we can't soup it up a bit. And so our longtime producer, Brett Soddy, and I had it remastered.
Yep.
And, and we were able to do things sonically that we weren't able to do at the time.
When they say remastered, are you going back to the original raw recording of each voice and instrument and laying them down and replaying them and cleaning them up?
Yeah, so it was from the original digital audio tapes, so from the original DAT tapes of each take. And we...
So you could have chosen different takes this time.
Yeah, well, I do have a bunch of different takes, actually, yeah. But we didn't. We tried to have the integrity of the album there.
Okay.
Yeah. So... And we were able to sonically adjust it like we couldn't do back in 1994. Yeah. And to the point where, so how you hear it now is more how we would have liked to have heard it. You know, I remember listening to it on CD a few years ago going, how on earth did this win Album of the Year? Because I was just like, oh my God. But, so things have changed. The production techniques have changed.
Yeah.
And... a lot of digital trickery.
Yes, so you did that. Is that what whetted the appetite to say, hey, guys?
Yeah, and then everyone was curious, some emails were going around going, hey, imagine if we got back into the studio and this material's really good. Oh, I haven't heard that song for 10 years. My God, that song's all right. I remember hating it at the time because all these rarities were coming up, which we've still got plans for as well, but... And then when the pandemic hit, it was actually our bass player that was instrumental in doing it. He just sent around Rob an email, just went, look, why don't we just get together? No one's going overseas, no one's doing anything of that. You guys got anything better to do? And then everybody started to get really interested in what would happen, I think, you know.
Yeah.
And because we've all kept in touch, but we had to sort of redefine our friendship again in a way, you know. And... but it worked out, and we ended up in the studio and this record tipped out, and now everyone's got that gang mentality back, and it's great.
And what was it like writing together again? Because you guys...
It's just amazing. I honestly, I can't tell you how good it felt. I had forgotten, because I've been in various other acts and played with literally dozens of other musicians since, because Ivolitar's got a revolving door of collaborators. But when I got in the room with these guys, I then remembered that chemistry, how good it felt. It's something I can't explain, to be honest.
All right. Now, we've already featured one of the songs from your new album, Sideways, in the last episode 348. But the first track I'd like to play from Smoke and Mirrors and Other Half-Truths now is called Love Lies in the Rain. And the reason I want to start with this is because when you sent me your album, I think it was earlier this year, late last year, I was listening while I was cooking one night, and I found a random email that I tapped out to you while I had my apron on. Things were sizzling behind me, and I wrote this, quote, "Love Lies in the Rain is a standout to me." So can you set the song up? What are we about to listen to?
Well, Peter had this tune going back to when we were kids. Like, I just remember him sitting in the corner, strumming it on a guitar, and I'd been hearing that tune for about 30 years. And so he threw that tune into the ring, and that's what kind of flourished out of it. Like, very quickly we're all over it. So, yeah.
So just like people, farmers who've been seeing clouds go overhead in a drought for decades, finally they burst.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And love lies in the rain.
Time goes by so slowly now. You're still on my mind. There was always the little things that got to me. Painting pictures of how things might have been. Love is where you left it, even though you found it lying in the rain. And I can't help this feeling. Maybe you're still wondering how I'm getting on.
need to get a couple of things out the way. Looking at the album itself, first of all, Smoke Mirrors and Other Half-Truths. Tell me about that title. What does that mean to you?
I think it was really our bass player, because he's a writer, he has this kind of like flight of ideas for titles, and he really loves wordplay. Mm-hmm. And Smoke and Mirrors had been toyed with, I think, on many different occasions, but I don't know, it just eventuated out of kind of a push me, pull you kind of situation where, he would suggest something, the rest of us would just dismantle it, put it back together a different way. It was, we were just being creative, having fun, really.
I love it because it's bold and it's guarded at the same time. So
Sure.
Smoke Mirrors and Other Half-Truths. That's quite a claim, but it's also a little...
It's the music industry, really. Yeah.
as we've discovered.
Yeah.
The cover art, though, who is that woman, and how do you explain this mosaic of images?
So with the cover art, she's a really lovely Yugoslavian lady based in Germany. Her name's Lydia, and she creates these really haunting images. Gary found her on Instagram. We all had a look and loved what she did, and then we fell in love with it. And we approached her and said, look, we feel like what you create ties in with the mood of what we've made. So would you like to at least have a listen? And she fell in love with the record straight away. She was back within a day and said, absolutely, I want to be a part of this. Then she actually made the stop motion. So we've got a stop motion video with paper dolls for Sideways for the first, It's just incredible, the patience that this woman has.
We need to embed that in the show notes. This is creative people reaching out and getting excited by each other's ideas.
We're friends for life now. It's good. Yeah.
Now, something I noted was how evocative this album is of my vague recollections of what 90s music was, but also hints of some of the more complex stuff from the 80s. I'm thinking early Cure, Simple Minds to a degree, early U2. There's a noisy quality that is, for your ears, what scrambly, busy artwork is like for your eyes. It demands stillness and application, and then it sort of rewards those who sit with it. Do you think that's fair?
That's a really generous description of what we do. We like to make multi-layered, complex things. But, we don't want it to be difficult for the listener to wade through, We just write pop songs, but we like to make them a little bit more complicated,
Well, having said that, one thing I do note from the new album, though, is how much, and I sort of put inverted commas, noise. I don't mean noise in a pejorative sense, but there is that layering. That aspect is actually more refined in this album. To my ear, there's more definition of the specific instruments and the voice, more so than the early stuff. Is that just a moving of your style, or is it more about modern recording techniques, or have I just missed it all?
No. I think it's everything. We were able to take our time with this record. We had the luxury of a few different facilities to complete it. We weren't in a rush. It wasn't like, back in the day when the tape was rolling, and a reel was like $600 a reel, and you could only put 3 takes on it, and time was it was a completely different ball game. And now we're kind of better at what we do. We continued playing even though we weren't together. We all continued playing, refining our skills, and it's a combination, I think, of modern production and us kind of getting a little bit better and being less cacophonous, I suppose.
I wanted to circle back to that real thing and the limitations. So I do a lot of work in the creative area, and I always argue that when you've got limitations and boundaries around you, it more or less forces your creativity to find solutions and thrive. So if you think back, where it cost a fortune to be recording and you had to get it right in a few times, does that lend itself to a discipline and a quality and some surprises, whereas now you've got infinite time? Can you sort of wander and meander and not have that same pressure?
For me, it's a happy medium of both those situations.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I know sometimes your first idea is your best idea,
Yes.
but not necessarily See, I circle back to it casually, whereas in the old days I had to circle back very quickly, you know, like because the clock was ticking.
Yes.
I remember when Peter and I were the drummer, we were in a previous band together to the Violets, and we won a recording day.
Oh, what band was that?
Oh, it's
Or you don't want to say?
we're just
Okay, fine.
kids band.
Okay.
You know? It was a terrible name, and we casually went into the studio and we were soaking up the atmosphere for the first time. We were like tapping on mics, going check 1 2, and it was like just mucking around. We took forever to set up the drum kit, and then the guy goes, "Okay, well you've only got like 2 hours left of your budget," and we're like, "What?" We just didn't realise. So the next time we went to the studio, we had the drum kit set up outside the door. As soon as he opened it up, it was cyclonic. We were like, "Right, we're in." We were helping him mic up. We're like, "Come on!" We were whipping him, you know,
Yeah.
like, "Get on the desk, we're recording," you know.
I love it. Now, April's Fall from the new album.
Sure.
To me, it's an example of delicate qualities in this album. It's modern. It's got an adult music to it, but the lyrics, they contain snatches of kids' rhymes and allusions. Can you whet our appetites for it?
Well, Jeremy wrote this, and as soon as I heard it, it just took me back to how I felt when I was very young, not like a teenager. There's something about it in the melancholy in the music. So it is about youth. It is about being really small and how magical the world is, you know, like jumping creeks and, you know, hurting yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and I often go back to this one experience of being very, very young and falling in love with this girl. And even though I was like only about 12, and I kind of, every now and again, I kind of touch on those feelings when I'm writing. So for me, there's nothing more powerful than, you know, those first experiences of everything in your life. And over the years, I think I've gotten a little more refined in how I articulate those things lyrically.
Yeah.
I just, really for myself, if anything, I just like to play with how I convey that to the listener.
And hats off to Jeremy too, because I had exactly the same evocation with
Wow,
this.
there you go.
With this song, it's exactly where it took me. And I suppose we're recording in April, so maybe we're both April's Fall.
Skimming stones, kicking leaves, aching bones, jumping creeks. We were all of this and more. We were all of this and more. One soul, we were one soul. When I said I loved you, and you believed me, that was not a lie. No, it all went awry.
April's Fall, beautiful, beautiful song. And now, Matt Cahill. It's 2022.
Yep.
The album's out. How are things sitting right now for the Violets? What's the mood?
Yeah, it's well, we're all
Have you got a
excited.
plan?
We've got plans to. Well, we're really just pushing it at the moment. So we're making inroads into America and the UK. We really just want people to hear the record because we'd like to pique their interest because the band is very, very keen to get together again and perhaps, you know, even for a longer session and see what tips out of that. And we just want to keep making music. I mean, look, you know, all my life I've worked very, very hard to be half as good as my heroes. And it's just, for me, a privilege to be a part of the music scene.
Yeah.
So, and I've got these three incredibly talented colleagues that hopefully see me in the same light. One of them
Well, actually,
spoke
I've
to
got
me
a
recently.
message from them right here.
One of them spoke to me the other day. Yeah, so we just want to keep going.
Do the intro to each of them that you would do on stage. Give us their full names and walk us through the members of the Violets.
Yeah, so on drums we've got Peter Kershaw. On bass guitar we've got Gary Bowen. On keyboards and guitar we have Jeremy Conlon. And I'm Matt Cahill.
Fantastic. I love this. I felt like I was in an audience just then. Now, I've got to ask a question. Given the long break you guys had, and also the curse of biology, you guys are older than
Sure.
many of the other bands who are vying for ear time. Do you think that's going to influence your experience over the next few years? And I ask this because US commentator and comedian Bill Maher recently said to the 90-year-old William Shatner, he said, ageism is the one remaining discrimination that our society turns a blind eye to. What's your reading?
Well, you know, there's a certain liberation in not being signed or popular that I really embrace. I think we all do. We literally don't care what we look like or how people see us and that, as long as we can make music, you know, and I really don't care what anybody... You know, when I was young, that's all I cared about was how people perceived us and how we looked. And now that I'm older, I realise that it's just, they're not even thinking about us, they're thinking about themselves.
Well, that's true.
You know, they're not looking at our age, they're looking at their phone.
When I got a little bit older, I fell into the trap, like many older friends that I had, saying, don't police officers look so young these days? They've been the same age forever, but you just notice it. And in the music equivalent to that is I often hear songs that used to bring me to tears with just emotional
Sure.
journeys. And I've looked at them now and I go, that singer and writer was like 23 at the time.
Sure.
How dare they? How could they have that? So there's almost like you have greater authority now to write things that have emotional depth more so than when you were 19 or 20.
Oh, totally.
Don't you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I see young bands, and I think you know, and everyone's sort of lauding their work that they're doing now, and I think, man, I can't wait to hear the record that they make when they're 40. That's because I know that journey now. You know what I mean? Like,
Now, another quick comment I'd love from you is regarding the band name, The Violets. I found a UK band with the same name.
we've been around longer than them.
Yeah. But a young band from Western Australia called The Violets that seemed to have started in the early noughties while you guys were sort of in remission. Does this cause confusion?
Well, see, look, there was a Nirvana before there was a Nirvana.
Oh.
There's probably, they were a 60s psychedelic band. There's probably...
Well, my performing name was Elvis Presley. No,
I know,
there you go, yeah.
and it really got you in the door, didn't it? Yeah.
Now I've left the building.
Oh, gosh. Well, you know, like, we were originally Violet Town.
Oh,
and there was another Violet Town, you know, in New South Wales, and we got a letter from their management that said, look, cease and desist. Wow. And someone in the band just said, why don't we just be the Violets? And I was all for it. I just went, yeah, like, what the heck? Because I liked it anyway.
Yeah. And then a UK band
And then,
started.
well, actually then, no, we found out about 5 years later that there was a punk band from Athens, Georgia, that started in, I think, 88.
Oh, okay.
And they were called the Violets. And then after us was the UK band. And, you know, like, it doesn't really matter.
Did you send any cease and desist?
No, of course not.
Did
no.
you get any more from the others?
No, we didn't. I mean, like, the UK band, if they're not aware of us, all they've got to do is dig deeper and they'll realise that we had a record out in 1995, or we had one out in 92 or 3, I think. That was our first record. That was Ain't Love Grand. That was like 93, I think.
Right, okay.
So, you know, everyone's got to cop it a little bit.
It's like there's little flower beds of the violets all around the world.
Yes.
Now, where...
What we liked about it was that it was juxtaposed to our sound.
Yeah.
You know, when we would come out, sometimes we would launch our shows like a Boeing 747, and I'm not joking, it was just... And it was so juxtaposed to the name of the band, and we liked that juxtaposition.
Where and how can people support the Violets today?
Well, on the label, you can find any of our material. That's Paper Rock Scissors Records, and we've got a lot of material on Bandcamp, and there's more coming. So we're looking at a collection of rarities, and again, we're hoping to be in the studio, you know, within the next couple of years for sure. So.
All right, we'll put links to all of this in the show notes as you're listening. So even on your player, you can just scroll through the notes and click and go and have a look. Finally now,
Yes.
This is it. I found another quote from a random email that I sent you while I was cooking that night and listening to your album. This is what I wrote. All Went South is brilliant. Am thinking of a full episode, actually. Watch this space. Well, we've watched
here we
the
are.
space. We've filled it with some story and some music. Thank you, Matt Cahill.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Would you do the honours of setting us up and introducing the song that'll take us out, the song All Went South?
Okay, so you're listening to the Adelaide Show podcast with Steve Davis. I'm Matt Cahill from the Violets, and this is All Went South.
I don't see you around here much anymore. Dust is on the ground here, yeah. Just like round my front door, yeah. I don't hear your footsteps, baby. Ooh. No, not a sound you make. Oh. People say they see you around, but not me. I remember every word out of your mouth. From the hot tar, yeah. Ooh. Well, don't look back. No, never got me that far. We were clinging to the dashboard, sideways around every corner, yeah. And I still remember every word you said before it all went south. It all went went south. Well, it all went south. As much as I regret it, it all went south. Yeah.
And now it's time for the musical pilgrimage.
Somewhere the Violets take 53.
Somewhere in the back of my mind, I can feel you in there. Sitting on the floor in a room near a window, with a view I could hardly bear. I don't want to remember anymore. I don't care to recall all the details. Somewhere in the back of my life, sometime long ago in a dream, I said all the right things. Maybe. Then a silhouette of an arm drew the curtain back, and a breeze blew on in. Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't want to remember anymore. No, I don't, no, I don't know. I don't care to recall all of the details. Somewhere in the back of my life, somewhere, 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 yeah. Somewhere, 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 down deep in the back of my life.
Dear listener, thank you for being with us in this bumper Easter edition of the Adelaide Show podcast. Until the next episode, it's good night from me, Steve Davis. Good night, Don.
The Adelaide Show podcast is produced by my dad, Steve Davis. If you want to start a podcast or get some help producing creative content, talk to him. Visit stevedavis.com.au. Thanks, AJ. I'm Caitlin Davis, and I agree with everything my sister said. But there's one more thing to say. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a rating or a review, because that will make my dad really happy. Oh, and one more thing. If you really, really liked it, please help a friend put the Adelaide Show on their phone. Thanks for listening. Buzz, buzz, I want to be.
Adelaide, 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 ooh, Adelaide, Adelaide, Adelaide.